All right, like call close North Aurora Committee of the whole meeting for Monday, September 16th, 2024 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Nedredge.
Here.
Trustee Salazar. Here.
All right, audience comments? Okay.
My name is Gino Dobleman, 1417 Fieldside Lane, North Aurora, Oak Hill subdivision. You guys are doing the pond. I guess our HOA is now dissolved. It's now part of the village. And you guys, I guess there were some preliminary estimates where you guys are gonna, we're paying you guys back. The terms are, what, 10, 15, 20 years. The longest term, in my opinion, would be the greatest. It's like buying a car, take the longest term, smallest payment, everybody gets paid back. So, I mean, there's no other homeowners here, which kind of sucks, but I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I go for the longest term. Whatever we can do, I mean, you guys are gonna get paid back. There's some families that have been impacted from COVID, and to impact them on a shorter term, you're probably gonna see a lot of houses go for sale. So I vote for myself and the homeowners, I guess, that aren't here to take us the longest term. So.
All right. Thanks, Gino.
Thanks.
Anyone else? All right. Trustee comments? All right. Item 1 under discussion, Steve.
Thank you. Item number 1 is a new liquor license. MP's Liquors, which is located at 905 Oak Street, is changing ownership. And we've seen a lot of this recently. So basically our code requires them to come in. Anyone who changes owners has to switch to the new person. The new person then has to go to the board to could be the same business, same name even, but because it's a new owner, they have to go through the certification process. So it is in front of you tonight, and they are looking to reestablish a Class D license in the same location.
Okay. Problem?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. All right. Anything else for that, Steve? Good.
Yeah, that's it. Then it just comes back to the board for approval.
All right. Item 2.
Item number 2 in front of you tonight is the Little Ducklings Daycare, 581 Sullivan. Ethan's going to do a small PowerPoint. It's a daycare that wants to open right by the roundabout in Aurora off of so North Aurora side, on the other side on Sullivan. And with that, it's a special use. So Nathan's going to go through it.
Okay, thank you. There you go. So 581 Sullivan is in the office research district and is currently approved with a multi-tenant building, medical office type office building. The building is currently divided into 2 units. Suite A to the north has office tenants in it. Little Ducklings would be taking Suite B, which is roughly 2,200 square feet. The previous tenant in there was a medical tenant that had pretty high turnover in traffic. So, they believe that the daycare traffic will not be any greater than that. So, it should fit in there. So they would take the whole southern half building there. So they would improve the southern half with space for office space and kitchen, storage closet, dedicated infant area. They'd have infants and toddlers. They don't go into school age children, so it's just the littles. They are planning to have 28 children total, 17 toddlers, 11 infants. Hours of operation would be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. By our code, they would only require 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So when you add them and the existing unit to the north, the zoning ordinance would require 13 spaces. The site has 23 spaces. The main discussion at the Planning Commission, this went to the Planning Commission beginning of September, was voted for approval. The main discussion was just designating which spaces, there's high turnover in the morning and the evening, so which spaces are the spaces for the kids to be dropped off. They don't bring anybody out to the car, so the parent has to park, come in, either with an ID card or a key fob, and get their child and bring them out. So there won't be kids in the parking lot. They don't let them go out or wait out there. You have to come get your kids. So it's very secure. You won't have people hanging out in the parking lot. With that, as I said, the Plan Commission voted to approve with a few standard conditions. We have the architect and building owner here to answer any questions you may have.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's great.
It's fine.
Good. Yep. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Item 3, Steve.
Thank you. Item number 3 is our purchasing policy update. We brought it in last meeting to specifically talk about change orders, especially with the Public Works building coming up, where there is a design contingency actually built into the budget that you just approved tonight, specifically for change orders. And once again, these types of change orders might have to be done on a very quick basis, otherwise construction has to be halted. So with that, Jason's gonna talk about the solutions that we are trying to present to the board. There it is. Let's go to the next one. Just takes a second to load.
Go to the next one. Yeah. All right, so last time we had went over the change orders for over $25,000, and we added some language in there to kind of make it to where the village administrator could do those change orders when they're in at the time impractical to delay the project for time reasons. So that first set of highlighted yellow there is things that we added since that meeting that wasn't what you saw previous. And we're better just trying to define and say when and why we're doing change orders or what we do these change orders. So we just said in order to prevent additional costs, sense of time delays or impacts to adjacent properties. So these are ones that the village administrator could do these, again, similar to our emergency purchase project, upon concurrence from the mayor. And then what we did add to is notification of the board. So you'd get concurrence to the mayor saying, we're going to do this change order policy because if we delay it they're going to have to come out and the crews will have to remobilize. It'll cost us more money, or we have something kind of ripped up and we need to get it back together to impact adjacent properties. But if the mayor would concur with the village administrator, then he would just send a notification to the rest of the board saying, here's what we did. It's going to be on the next board meeting for formal approval, just so everybody kind of stays in the loop on it. And again, it's this kind of model after our emergency purchase section to where we have some leeway just when kind of time is of the essence. We have to act now on it. You want to go to the next one? So here's a new section that we added that wasn't talked about last time. And this really came up as part of the Public Works building when we started talking about how change orders could happen fairly significantly, or a lot of them during the process of building that building. So what we came up with was the village administrator may approve change orders within the available contingency and allowances funds included as part of the contract, provided that the change orders are required to complete the scope of work as presented, let's just say scope of work as presented and previously approved by the village board, and not increase the total approved contract. So basically, if it's over his authority, but we're still well within the contract, we have those contingencies, we can use some of that contingency money just to keep the project going, rather than saying, for instance, for the Public Works building, there might be a number of little change orders just constantly happening. So if we had to kind of every 2 weeks wait to get formal approval, or be sending out emails saying, hey, here you concur on this, we're going to do this change order. As long as we're not changing the total approved contract amount, that contingency fund, we're using some of that just to do these little change orders here and there. We're asking permission to do that. Again, just as long as whatever the total dollar amount you asked or we approved, we're not going above that amount.
And, after talking to Jason after the last meeting and meeting with FQC, our construction manager, it really hit home that these time sensitive change orders are almost always going to be on projects that have contingency budgets or allowances already built into them. So the example we used where we almost had a change order that would have delayed the whole road program was the $2 million road program, which has allowances in it for, the different types of materials and stuff. So that's where we're going with something like this. The board is already approving that total dollar amount for the project. The scope of the project was to build a road, and it had all the allowances for the types of materials that needed, and they could vary depending on what you see in the field when you get there. And that was our big thing. FQC said, if you don't approve something that like this in your purchasing policy, you're going to need to have something for our project specific, because there are going to be times that they come to us and say, and I'm just using an example, an architect designs a plan, and on the plan it says, you know, there's no wall. But then when they get there, there is a wall. And then all of a sudden they say, well, hang on a second, there's a wall here. We need to put a pipe through this wall. How do you put a pipe through this wall? So then you might have to reroute pipe in the middle of a project and say, well, now we need to go back and change this. It's going to be $30,000 because we have to cut into the wall and reroute the whole pipe. Things like that are going to pop up in the field, and then you're going to have to delay the whole project to bring it back 2 weeks later, which is why we have a $900,000 contingency fund in the budget. So that's what we're looking to do is things like that, approve them quickly. What we did, because I want to make sure the board always has, you know, you're saying everything that's outside of that scope for sure, is we even made sure that things that we put on hold for that project, like the monument sign, we talked about putting it out there that we might do one. That's outside the scope of building a building. It's not in that contingency fund. We would have to bring that back and actually talk to the board specifically about adding that to the project, if that makes any sense.
Go to the next one.
Sure.
And here are just a couple additional minor changes to clean up things. We had this section in here mentioning that the village administrator can execute change orders if we extend the project more than 30 days. We really just viewed this as sometimes projects get delayed for reasons outside of our control, whether contractors are waiting on equipment or parts, and just, I guess, didn't find it necessary to have to come back and say, we're going to delay this project or we're going to improve another 60 days just because we're waiting on a thing. Like we approved it, we're waiting, you know, we've have the money in the budget, and it's just kind of when it gets done, you know, as soon as it can. And then finally, we had some wording on each of the ones, whether it's change orders below 25,000 or change orders above 25,000. We had saying that the village administrator can approve to increase or decrease the contract. So again, we removed the decrease because we just didn't know like why we had to come back, or we should come back to the board just to say we are approving a decrease of $5,000 to this change order. Like, I guess we're just more worried about the increasing of it and was staying within the purchasing
I think
rules.
that was past practice years ago to just show the board on let's say a big scale project, how much money we saved. And you'll go back and you approve a change order reducing the cost, but all it is to us in our world is just a cost savings. We save money, which we try to do on every project. So, you know, road programs come under budget sometimes, and to come back to the board just to say we came under budget, to have a change order approved didn't make any sense to Jason and I.
Yeah, and finally, and the thing I don't have up here is I think last time we had talked about setting up maybe on an annual basis during the budget of reviewing the purchasing policy or bring the purchasing policy, kind of opening it up every year. We ended up not putting the language in the policy related to that just because, you know, when we're looking at it, if we don't have reasons to open it up or something kind of, you know, we'll go through the motions of kind of opening up. Does anybody have any questions and comments? I feel like since I've been here, at least we've kind of, I don't know how many times we've reviewed this and made changes to it constantly. So it seems like anytime something comes up, we're already bringing it back, getting feedback.
And of
making
course, the board
changes.
can always ask.
Yeah.
The board at any time can ask me to bring the purchasing policy back, and I'll put it on, you know, an upcoming agenda right away. So it, you know, it's just, Jason and I were saying to limit it to just May, then we might bring an update to you in February we want to do, and then bring it back 3 months later.
So those are the changes. If everybody has any questions on those or follow-ups.
I'm fine with those.
Yeah, all makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
On the next agenda item, which deals with Oak Hill, I have suggested that trustee Nedved step out of the meeting as trustee because he lives in the subdivision, and he has agreed. It's you know, it's a little bit different than all of the trustees voting on taxes generally. Obviously, you all get taxed as residents of the village. In this particular situation, we're talking about a special service area tax for one portion of the village where trustee Nedved lives. And so yeah, he stands in a different relationship to this issue than the rest of the board. So in these sorts of situations, it's usually a good idea for the trustee to step out and let the rest of the board kind of who don't have a horse in the race to address the issue, and kind of avoids the appearance of conflict of interest, and kind of keeps things above board. And of course, we always need to be concerned about those things when there is any kind of an interest that a particular board member has that's unique, that's not shared by the rest of the board members. So we talked about it. Trustee Nedved will step down. The clerk should note that he left the meeting. He can take a seat, but he's not sitting up here. And then when we're done talking about it, he can come back up.
Thank you.
I can sit out there. Okay.
Right, item 4, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 4 is regarding the Oak Hill Special Service Area Detention Basin Erosion Assessment. As the board may recall, recently the Oak Hill HOA dissolved, and once they dissolved, the village had the properties deeded over to us, and we are in control of the pond and the common areas now of that subdivision. For reference, even if the HOA was still active, we still have an SSA on that land. So we were actually taking money on the tax levy for the pond in the past few years to build up a fund to do a study about the pond's erosion. So the homeowners up until this year, basically paying an HOA fee, that was covering their common areas. We had an additional SSA fee, and that was to oversee the future pond issues by hiring a company, putting money aside for a study, things like that. When the HOA dissolved, we blended them together. Once we got the deeds to the property, we now, like I said, we levy $15,000 a year for the pond, $10,000 a year for the common area. So each homeowner sees that they don't get an HOA fee now, but now they see on their tax bill an SSA fee of that dollar amount. So with that being said, we knew when the pond came to the village, one of the concerns that the HOA had was the ability to fund a massive project for erosion that they were seeing in their pond. And if you remember, their pond is a unique pond because it has a creek that actually pours into the pond. Then that pond actually has a creek that comes out of it and goes into our town center wetland. So it holds, it's almost the last stop until it hits the wetlands for all the neighborhoods draining into it. So we hired V3, which is a company that is known for they do engineering and they do construction, but they also are wetland experts. And so we had them look at the pond and we hired them to do an assessment. What they did was they basically looked at the erosion and they looked at a total of 2,650 linear feet. So the whole big pond there, you see it on the screen. And what they did was they said that they believe 600 linear feet of that is what they would consider a high priority, needs to be addressed. The erosion is really bad, needs to be addressed immediately. They also said that 1,355 feet is medium priority, meaning it's not there yet, but it's getting that way soon. It's going to be in the high priority eventually. It's just, it hasn't got there yet. And then the rest of the pond, which I believe was a little over 600 feet, was in the low priority, which they said was no concern for any time in the future at this point. So with that, you have roughly 1,900, almost 2,000 feet out of 2,650 that need to be addressed at some point. So what the staff did was we asked V3, based on their assessments, to do an estimate basically on how much the cost to rectify those areas would be and what they would recommend. They recommended two things. They recommended what I call it shoreline smoothing, but that's basically where they try to regrade some of the shoreline and put some vegetation and plantings in to stop erosion. And then of course, the more obvious one is stone toe, which is basically putting riprap and stone at the bottom of the eroded areas to keep the waves and whatnot from impacting and pulling the shoreline further into the pond. Based on those two, and just for reference, rock is more expensive than the other one. They go into the vegetative route. Based on that, they have stated, and if you see real quick before I flip, you can see on the screen there, all the red areas are the high priority and the orange areas are medium priority. This is an example. This is some of the pictures from Oak Creek, and you can see how there's a steep drop off in some areas. And where they, if you read the report that's in the packet, it actually talks about it's the wind, it's the direction of how the water moves with the waves and the movement that really affects certain areas differently. That area is very open, so it is very susceptible to westerly winds, which of course is the predominant winds around here. And it gets direct wind that pushes up against those shorelines consistently. So based on their estimates, you see the stone post stabilization, and then they call it bank reshaping. The high area alone, which is that 600 feet, is about $100,000 estimated. And then they're estimating the medium priority area is 273,000 with a combination of both. So the total to do everything that they're recommending we address is almost $375,000. That number is in line with what we were worried it might be, which was several $100,000. So based on that, it didn't shock us to see the price, although it is high. But once again, this is an estimate. We have not gone out. We have not asked for proposals yet from companies. So the next step is to ask the board, as since we are now the owners of the pond and we are in charge of its maintenance, if you would like to move forward with the project, what we would do is we would either do the high priority area or the high and medium priority areas all at once. And there is some benefit to doing it all at once. It keeps the mobilization down. It keeps the fact that you're going to rip up that pond, and then next year or the year after, you're going to come back and rip up everything you just replanted in order to go back out there. Of course, costs go up. So the longer you put the second phase out there, the more costly it could be. So with all that being said, I think the staff recommendation would be to rip the Band-Aid off and do it all at once, because we're going to end up doing all of it at some point is our feeling. Now with that, it's a lot of money, and the HOA and the did not have that kind of money available. Our SSA does not have that kind of money available. So what we would need to do is basically treat this as a project that's like a special assessment. So what you do is you say, every year we're still going to levy for general pond maintenance. We're still going to levy for common area maintenance, the landscaping and the cutting of the grass. But what we want to do is add on to the SSA a very specific program just to address the erosion control. And as the resident alluded to when he was here earlier, the cost to do that obviously is high. So what we did was we broke down the cost per home. It's roughly $4,000 per home if you were to do it all at once today. The village has adequate money in our capital fund. So what we would do is we would simply transfer whatever money comes back from the proposals we get. If the board approves them, we would move forward with the project, transfer the money into the SSA fund, and we would fund it all at once, or depending on how the board wants to do it over time. But either way, we would fund it that way, and then we can charge back the residents on their tax bill through the levy and have them pay it back to us. So we front the money like almost like a bank with zero interest, and we're just doing the project and then asking for payment. So there's 92 homes in Oak Hill, and based on that number, those are the dollars you would see annually over a 10-year period, 15-year period, or 20-year period, just to give the board an idea of what dollar amount would look like. So right now, as you can see, the 20-year to do everything adds $200 a year to their tax bill. Just for reference, our current SSA on average is around 270 per tax bill. So that means their SSA would be around $470, $475 a year. I want to make sure that's clear that that is a separate number that would be added to the existing number that's already on.
Dave, I have a question.
Yeah.
What was the HOA dues? When it was-
So the
Yeah, good
HOA
idea.
dues are actually slightly less than what we were charging. So we put $10,000 for common area. When we took it over, there was roughly about $8,000 in expenses a year. So those dues that are currently out there, they were in the 200 range.
Per year?
Yes.
So the SSA, when we took it over, it was pretty much just a swap instead of paying the HOA.
If it went up, it didn't go up dramatic number.
Okay.
But
So
this almost
I just want to
doubles
be
it.
clear that we're not putting a burden by saying, well, you have this from us plus this from us. But this from us was already there prior to us.
Correct.
Okay.
So what's interesting is you got to remember, we, not only did they have the HOA fee, and let's just say it was $150 a year, we already had a $15,000 fee for the SSA. So you would have taken their HOA fee, added that $15,000 divided by, so is that another $150 a year roughly? So they're already paying $300. When the HOA went away now, they would be paying at the lowest option around 475. So the margin difference would be about $300 to $475.
Well, I say we do the high and medium at the 20-year. That's where I'm at. Give them a break. And it needs to get done. It's part of our waterway, especially with that creek running through it.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First, why would we not charge interest?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we've never done that in the past, but we've never had a project like this in the past. So it would just be an added tax to the residents. So we just started as if it was a flat rate.
I mean, obviously, if we're taking that money out of our funds that we could potentially use for something else, or even just be making the interest in an account, I feel like we should recoup some of that if we do go with the 20-year option.
We could always split the difference and do the 15-year as a show of good faith. But how long is it estimated that this is going to last? I mean, how often does this need to be done?
So that's a good question. So the reason that it's this way is, talking to Brandon a little bit earlier tonight, one of the concerns Oak Hill residents had years ago when there was some, and we're talking probably 20 years ago, there was some vegetation that was put in their pond with some SSA funds to try to stop erosion a long time ago. But it never took and it wasn't replanted or anything like that. So I think some people might be skeptical, which is why the staff is actually going to have an informational meeting with Oak Hill. Assuming we get direction tonight, we're going to go out to RFP, get proposals. But before we bring it back for approval to the board, we're actually going to have a meeting with the neighborhood, or at least invite them to a meeting where they can ask us about the project. But to answer your question, Brandon said one of the things we could do is in the proposals, we can ask for, instead of, let's say, a 1-year maintenance period like we do on some contracts with landscaping, we could do maybe a 3-year period where they have to come back every year basically and address any areas that need, like the vegetation didn't take properly, or it needs more stone. Some of it fell in, it wasn't properly graded when they put it out there. So at least you have that to make sure that the footing is taking place the first 3 years before we maintain it. And here's the thing, quite frankly, the HOA, once they put it in, if you don't have the funds to constantly put more vegetation in and manage it, it would never take. With us, because we're charging that $15,000 of general maintenance every year already, the idea is that we use that for general maintenance of the pond. So things like adding vegetation when needed, also dredging the creek that goes from the pond to the town center wetlands, which sometimes causes the pond to elevate its water levels. Those are things that we are accustomed to that maybe HOAs aren't. So, and that we have village engineers on staff, so they would oversee those types of programs.
I think, I don't know about, I don't know about doing an interest rate on our taxpayers. I think people are taxed to death. I think we just go with the 20-year high and medium, give them a break. That piece of property back there, I know where it's not too far from where we live. That creek kind of runs, how long is that creek that goes through there? It's part of our waterway, like, kind of needs to we need to have that repaired, and we're already paying an extra $200 and we're going to have to pay another $200.
Well, this is part of my
People that
concern,
live in
though.
this development, it's an amenity that is specific to this development, and this enhances the neighborhood specific to this neighborhood only. I'm willing to go for the 15-year split the difference. I agree with Trustee Christensen that to finance something this large for 20 years and not recoup interest on it, this isn't our money, it's the taxpayers' money. I have no problem doing a 15-year splitting the difference, and I like the idea of having the 3-year maintenance. But, because it was an HOA that planned poorly or whatever the issue was, that burden shouldn't be passed down to the rest of the village, in my opinion.
Well, it's not, they're ultimately paying for it. So ultimately, the village gets paid back. So it's not like the taxpayers are paying for it. The village recoups the money back through the 20-year plan. So they get paid back.
People who live in this community are getting enhanced value to their property, an enhanced environment because of this pond. So to say they shouldn't, be paying for the maintenance of it, and that instead it should be passed along to the entire village at some point, because the interest, we're talking probably tens of thousands of dollars in interest that we're going to be paying on this. And again, our job's to be a good steward of our taxpayers' money and to say, well, we're not going to be doing 10 years because that's a burden on the homeowner, but we'll shift the burden at 20 years to the entire village. I don't.
What is the interest somebody run the numbers on that, Jason? Just for clarification. Plus, we're not taking the maintenance to the rest of the community, right?
Well,
Be
what we're
clear.
saying is there wouldn't be any interest because we're not borrowing the money. We're what?
I think what
we would be
Jason means is
charging-
that if it's in our account, it's drawing interest.
We
I
make
mean,
money on it.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, how much would that be? I'm just curious. That-
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is it big number, a little number? I mean, you're not getting much on interest anyway right now, but
Yeah, in the 3 to 4% right now.
Maybe,
yeah.
let's say,
In what world are interest rates at 3 to 4%?
That's what our investments are at right now of what we're earning. Again, in the 4%.
But as far as maintenance from this point forward, they're still gonna, the maintenance is gonna be part of the SSA, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so there's no other taxpayer is gonna pay for the maintenance.
Right.
It's still
This is
gonna be them.
specific to them.
Yes.
So yes, I heard two different questions. I heard one about the interest we lose in the bank
Mhm.
by fronting the money and not collecting. Then I thought I heard also, are we borrowing money and actually paying interest on this? No, okay.
No, her other question was, I believe, was about maintenance that the
Okay.
rest of the community is covering that. Is that correct? That what you're asking?
Well, when you look at most HOAs, I mean, even if you take the 400 and the 200, that's maybe 600 a year cumulatively. That's still pretty average for HOAs in the area. So I don't think we're really putting that much of a burden on the homeowner.
So Steve, if you answered Trustee Curtis's question, I probably didn't hear it, which is how long will this last? How long will the stone last? Is that, I understand there'll have to be maintenance from time to time, but is it kind of the stone, is it considered a permanent fix? I understand the
No, I
vegetation
mean,
might
even, like,
die
we
off
put
here and
stone
there,
by
but
the river here, by our spillway, and every now and then we do touch it up if people, truth be told, it's people throwing stones in the water, but stone is pretty stable for a long time.
Mhm.
But the $15,000 that we charge separately.
would be for the maintenance
Yes,
to keep it up
yes. We're looking at
afterwards.
this like a capital project, and we're funding just one very specific project while also having a separate.
How about the low priority? Will that become high priority in 5 years and we're gonna be?
Doesn't sound
hitting-
like it.
No.
Brandon, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, they don't really anticipate it getting much worse, but obviously we'll keep an eye on it, and if we see some deterioration, would do maintenance regularly to prevent it from getting a lot worse.
I think the other thing about the pond is that it is not just an amenity, right? Because you have a creek coming into it and then it also feeds into the wetland. So it is an amenity. It is that, yes, but it is also, right, it's significant way through for the waters that go into the wetland. So it serves a purpose, right, that we need.
yes,
It has to drain
I
off.
mean, it goes north of Oak Street,
So
right?
it's not
the
just a
creek
pond that
goes
people look
farther up.
at. It has a purpose and it has water coming in and it has water coming out. Those things continue, and that's why you have the erosion to begin with, as I understand the premise here. So it's not just an amenity. I hate to see if somebody's already paying, I'm just gonna say, I pay $200 a year for my HOA fee, but I don't have any really amenities to speak of, really. It's for lawn mowing or something. I actually don't even know what it's for, but I pay it. So, to have that increased $300 or $400 a year, to some people that may not seem like a lot, and to some people that's a lot of money. So, I don't know. I see your point, Jason, in the sense that all that money would earn us money. Somehow that doesn't feel right to me to sort of put interest on it as well. I don't know.
Especially in my mind, we're taking water north of Oak Street from other people's subdivisions, right? And that's running through that creek into their pond. I'd waive the interest if it was me, but
The first question, Dave's just talking to Jason. I'm not sure because this is the first time would have to front money that I'm aware of into a capital, from the capital fund to an SSA. So from a legal standpoint, I'm not sure, can you charge interest on an SSA account? I'm not sure.
I believe the answer is yes. I think as a legal matter, we could if we wanted to. I don't think we have to. I don't think there's a legal obligation that we charge interest.
Couple other concerns is in a subdivision much like this, just across the way, our dues are currently at $350 and they're looking at raising that and adding a special assessment due to pond issues. So I just want to treat this as a learning experience for all of us because this could potentially become another issue moving forward. New subdivisions come into play, whatever. do we change the regulations so that when these ponds are put in, they meet these regulations ahead of time? They do have those stone toes and everything is shored up well so that the village doesn't find themselves in a similar situation moving forward.
Sure. So I'm gonna actually bounce that to Nathan first and then Brandon, because it's actually a more complicated question, because when a pond comes into a development, it's subject to the King County Stormwater Ordinance, and they require certain best management practices and everything to be accounted for. And of course, the engineers have to figure out exactly what amount of storage they need as well. So that has to go through a whole process. What I would ask is if we can require in a development specifically stone or something like that.
So, the example you gave earlier, to the board update in Lincoln Valley, that's a new subdivision. The pond is only a couple years old and, the water all drained out of it. Now it's still functioning fine as stormwater, but the residents are concerned that it looks ugly. That one was designed per modern standards. We have we have design drawings and as-built drawings, things that we don't have in a lot of older subdivisions. It all looked like it met, all the structures were installed properly and everything seemed to be fine. And yet, a few years later, you still have an issue. So, there's no foolproof thing when you're out digging holes, things can happen. But, could we make it so that every pond had to have riprap? We probably could make an amendment to our subdivision ordinance to do that. The other ponds in Lincoln Valley down by 25 are all naturalized. They're all fine. There's been no issues down there, but they're, more wild plantings and things. So a lot of that is preference. Do people want to look at a manicured pond? Do they want to look at a naturalized area? And you're going to have different requirements for that. So, a one size fits all, like every pond has to have rock in it right now, may not be the right approach. You might have to do something like, if your pond is so big or so deep or going to have so much wave action, then you have to do stone. You might want to have a little bit more nuanced thing, but at that point, I turn to the engineer and say, well, what do we need to do?
I just thought it was worth asking the question.
Sure.
It's definitely a philosophical question because, and I've talked to the mayor before, we've had conversations about the spillway and rock and, are there other things you can do other than rock? Some people, I personally like the way rock looks along like the water's edges and things like that. But some people, HOAs may prefer vegetation or think it's more aesthetically pleasing to do it their way. But Trustee Christensen is right. What we're seeing is we are seeing a lot of subdivisions. There's multiple subdivisions who are coming to us with questions. Probably 4 off the top of my head this year alone, asking about pond maintenance because either they're not maintaining them the way they probably should, or they have questions because they're not sure how to maintain them. So
I don't know, maybe it's just me. I just see a difference with this pond. If you just have a pond that's just for aesthetic reasons, like it is in Lincoln Village, apparently, it's just there to look nice, right? And for water, of course, it serves that purpose. But this particular subdivision, it serves as a throughway for other water that needs to drain. So for me, there is a difference with this one as opposed to ones that are just there, for, if it rains a lot and to look nice and in between. So I don't know, and I'm guessing, Nathan, that would add a lot of money onto, certainly a cost onto new subdivisions, and that might be something that builders would consider if they had to come and they had to put that money into what is generally just a nice looking pond.
If you had a blanket across the board rule, every pond has, 5 feet of riprap. That would be the first thing they'd be asking to vary when they came in to get a
right.
Subdivision approved.
Then, weren't you asking Brandon something? I think we're not going to let him get off that easy.
Pretty good. I agree with there's not really a one like size fits all approach to it, where if you make it too restrictive, and now the ordinance is pushing more for wet bottom ponds, so there is probably gonna be erosion no matter what to some extent, and more maintenance with it than what kind of older subdivisions had, which just kind of dry basins where maybe you're just mowing turf grass and that's about it. So yeah, I don't know if you'd want to put in the ordinance that you have to do riprap around the whole perimeter. A lot of it does come down to, I guess, that like a good handover from the developer prior to an HOA that has good maintenance kind of outlined, and them hiring a proper contractor that knows what they're doing, maintaining a lot of the native vegetation that's now generally required around the perimeter ponds due to the ordinances. So
All right, thanks. So where are we at then with?
I'm have all different answers. So I have 15 years, 20 years interest and no interest. I have,
But mine is, you know where I'm at, right? 20 years, no interest, high and medium.
Yeah. Jason?
I'm fine with kind of just going along with the group and going with the 20-year. High end both.
Laura?
I think the HOA needs to have some skin in the game, and I'm fine with no interest, but I do think 15 years is a good balance.
What is the difference per year for the 15-year and the 20-year? If you could put that back up, please.
Yeah.
Like $50,
50? 70?
60.
It's really not that big of a difference. They mismanaged the HOA. This is a problem. I get it. It's a pass-through pond, but you know, that extra 5 years, I mean, I'm fine with splitting the difference, and let's have a little bit of a compromise.
Mike?
Well, my first inclination was what trustee Gately said was the 20-year with no interest, both high and medium. However, I don't have a problem with the 15-year thing. I don't think there's a big difference between the two, but it would be a nice PR thing, I think, if we allowed the lowest possible payment per year to those residents there. So that's kind of where I am on that.
I'm probably with trustee Lowry and Gately. I think that, you know, the resident took the time to come in. It does mean that there's people that are impacted everywhere, of course, with COVID, and $70 does mean something to them. And really, does it make that big of a difference to the village? And in the end, I don't think it does. And so I do think, like I said, this is sort of a special case in that this is a throughway for the water. I probably wouldn't, if it was just an aesthetic thing, I probably wouldn't go for it at all. But because it does serve a purpose other than just looking nice. And I think we should do it as well as we can now, right? We do the high and the medium as suggested. So that's where I'm at.
All right.
I think it would be worth having it quoted to see what the full scope of the entire.
And it could be, that is one thing that we haven't really emphasized, is that it hasn't been quoted. We don't know that it's
Yeah.
going to be that much money. It could very well be less. So, right?
and
Or,
once
I
again,
mean, maybe not likely, but it
to
could be
keep the
less.
price down, because low is, and this is gonna sound redundant, a low priority. And the fact that we're putting $15,000 a year in maintenance
Mhm.
specifically, that whole fund is to build up money for if, let's say, we saw the low areas starting to
Mhm.
degrade in areas, we would just start to address that as needed, but building up that SSA fund.
I'm fine with going with the 20-year with the 15.
But what I will tell you is one of the things where Brandon and I were talking about for the bid, or the proposals that we're gonna seek, is it would be nice for them to give us a price. It sounds like the board wants high and medium all at once.
Mhm.
But I'd like to see if they can break it out, just to see if there's a price break, you know, but the idea being that I'd like to see the high and medium broken out separately and just see if there's a price difference there for some reason.
Well, it could be.
Sure. I know.
It should be. After you're there,
You would
bringing
think
all the
we'd get
equipment in.
better.
Yeah. Plus, like you said, they're gonna ruin a lot of that, working on that the following year, or 2 or 3, whatever, and
Because then the price goes up.
yeah. I agree with the group, 20 years, and then I think same way, no interest, because it does take water from north of Oak Street. It's kind of the pass through or a staging area before the water goes out the wetlands, so.
So I'm gonna do high and medium, 20 years, no interest, that's what we're looking
Yeah.
at. I'm also going to let you know that we are going to look to see if we did a cursory review for grants, just to see, because it's an existing pond, it's harder to find grants for this. If we were creating water, it would probably be easier. But Brandon and I will reach out to, we have engineering consultants from EI, we have engineering consultants from WBK. We can ask them if they know of any stormwater grants that are available to maybe offset the cost to
Help the wetlands.
Oslot grants, maybe, perhaps, worth a shot.
Definitely.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to number 5. Steve.
Did we need to let the record show that trustee Nedved is back?
I just asked
Okay.
the attorney. He said we're good if she puts it in her minutes.
Yep.
Trustee Nedved is back on the dais. Welcome.
Say here.
All right, item number 5 tonight is the discussion of a new central water tower. A little bit of background here. There are 4 different types of elevated towers. And this, of course, this is in reference to our new tower project, which would be where the central tower is now next to our West Treatment Plant. For those who don't know, that's off of Princeton Drive. The tower is empty and that tower would be raised and a new tower would be built. For reference, the reason why that tower is empty is because our system is gravity fed. So when we built the West Side Tower by Woodman's, the height of that tower basically made the middle tower useless unless you raised it higher, which would have been super expensive. So they just built a bigger one on the west side to compensate. We've used it as a cell tower for the last few years, but now that'll go away. And this tower would be a larger tower. So as a little bit of background, there are 4 types of standard elevated water towers, and you've all seen that. The water spheroids are the ones we have in town now, so that's a real common one. The composite tower is ones, you don't see them very often, but those are ones with cement pillars at the bottom, and then they have metal at the top. The multi-leg is a good example is the one in Batavia off of Kirk Road by Fabian, by Settlers Hill. It's got like 6 legs coming down from it. That's a multi-leg. And then fluted is the ones you see that are all metal, but they have, the bottom is circular with almost like, it reminds you of the ribbon you see on the wall right here outside of Village Hall. They have that corrugated look to it. Those aren't very common and they're expensive because of the amount of steel. So there are 6 companies in the USA that we identified with our engineering consultant, EEI. Michelle is with us tonight in the audience, that can build at least one of these 4 standard designs. Of those, only 3 companies identified can build a 1 million gallon tower or larger. Why that's important, the tower we're looking to build is a minimum 1 million gallons. We're looking to possibly do a 1.25 million gallon tower. The issue with the getting down to 3 companies is because there's very limited pool of skilled boilermakers that can actually build these towers. So engineering started back in 2016 on this project. The original tower is going to be 750,000 gallons, but as we discussed over the last few months here, we've been doing a water study, and part of the thing is that we now realize that we need more water than we did. We're now deficient in the amount of water we carry. The town is growing. We know that we have big water users. I can't tell you, but there's been a run of people calling us to locate in town lately and asking questions who want to use a ton of water. And, we had one, obviously, about Aurora Pack, our largest user who wants to expand, and they're currently expanding. We had one user who may come back. They still own a building and they might do 150,000 gallons a day. We had someone call last week about 800,000 gallons a day. And that would be way more than even Aurora Pack uses. So people are looking at our area and we don't have enough storage in, the staff's opinion. We need to get storage up there now. So the original estimate for this project was 2.78 million. The tower was planned, like, as I said, by the current tower and the old one would be raised. The first bid went out in July of 2021. We received 1 bid. It was $1 million higher than the estimate. At the time, they did not meet the joint apprenticeship requirement that we have in our purchasing policy. So with that being said, it was rejected. The second bid went out in November, same size tower. We had an alternate composite tank bid, and then we received 0 bids. And then a third bid was done in the spring, the late winter, the following year in 2022. And that time we did get 1 bid. And that was after the village board exempted the general contractor from having to be in the joint apprenticeship requirement. And when that bid came back, it was CB&I that submitted a bid. At the time, they gave us a bid of 4.119 million, but then it was determined that it excluded other people that were clearly apprenticeship eligible, so they added it back in. So their bid was 4.374. There was a alternate tower just to see if the pricing of a water spheroid was comparable. And that tower was actually, as you see, at 5.73, very high. And then the decision was tabled by the board ultimately. So where we are in the current project is we identified that we really want a water spheroid. We have 2 of them already. They are the best in our staff's opinion based on the maintenance life cycle, the footprint, which is important because the site that a tower goes on, especially when it's gravity, it has to be really based on the contour of the land that you're building on, because the lower the land, the more expensive the tower, because you have to build the tower taller, which means more steel to equalize. So right now we have a good site, but we want to go with the water sphereway because it fits that site. It's pretty tight. And it matches all the other towers as well. And as you saw, the other one, composite towers, were more expensive in the past. So a 1.25 million gallon tower is what we're really looking at, but we're putting it as an alternate, the base, because we don't know what the price is going to be. I mean, when we did these bids originally, it was on a smaller tower, so we know that the price is probably going to be more. So to ask to go from 750 to 2, to go up 500,000 gallons without having a buffer in the middle, it might be cost prohibitive. So we wanted to do both. So we're doing $1 million and a 1.25 million bid. The increase in size, as I said earlier, is due to the current water studies we're working on and the projected water use. We'd like to bid this ASAP by end of September or early October. The goal is it takes about 1.5 years, maybe even as much as 2 years to build a tower. And we want to get the bid going now because with all the towns switching over to Lake Michigan water, all of the towns that switch to Lake Michigan have to have a requirement of a certain amount of storage. Some of those towns are deficient probably in how much storage they need. And some of those towns are in our region, in our area, and they're all going to be going out to bid around the same time, talking about the towns south of us that are going to Lake Michigan water. And it's going to put a real constraint on it, considering there's only 3 companies that can bid on these size towers. So the upcoming 4th bid, the concern was, given our history, we've had some issues trying to get bids. So in this case, we just wanted to run it past the board. As I said earlier, we did get 1 company that has bid in the past. That company is the only company that is able to meet our joint apprenticeship requirement. The last bid was tabled by the village board. Staff is seeking feedback primarily because of our history. We just want to make sure that we're going forward. And we're going to try something that works, and we think we have a good plan. So we're going to go over that in a second. If the bids are rejected this time, our concern is that if you bid it out 4 times and don't approve a bid, at some point, people are going to stop putting the time and energy to potentially bid on a project. So the current feedback and what's in your memo in front of you tonight is what we'd like to do is, having talked to our engineer and tried to figure this out. One of the issues is, since we have the joint apprenticeship program, one of the thoughts we had is that we don't ask for specific enough information in the bid packages from the companies. And we had talked to some people who had said that their concern was that they might not bid a project with that requirement unless it's very specific that only companies that can meet that requirement actually will fill out the form. So what we're doing is we're taking our existing requirement, we're not changing anything. We're just putting a stronger chart, a table in there that specifically will ask everybody to list every single trade with every single registered US DOL apprenticeship program name and number. So they have to verify up front. Very easy for us to check to verify that they have that information. And then the staff is looking for feedback on whether or not you feel that this is an appropriate path to go. And I have Michelle Piotrowski from EEI, who is engineering the project, here to answer any direct questions. So we're here for feedback on number 1, or if you have any questions about other options.
I think that's a good route to go, to make sure that they all comply with the US DOL apprenticeship program. Is that what Chicago Bridge and Iron are asking for? Is that one of their requirements?
They had indicated that, and this is where we don't get a lot of experience in these types of bids, but they had indicated that sometimes companies might put down, or they might imply that they have an apprenticeship program, but without having that chart that very specifically lists them by trade, it's hard to verify whether or not they meet the requirement or not.
So, because Chicago Bridge and Iron, let me finish. Chicago Bridge and Iron is basically the only company that can do it, and they're qualified to do it, and they can meet our requirements. You can agree or disagree with prevailing wage. However, that is the law in the state of Illinois. And judging by the makeup of the General Assembly, that's not going to change. In the Prevailing Wage Act is apprenticeship training, meaning that we're paying for it. And if we're paying for apprenticeship training, That's why we put this in back in 2009.
How do we solve this problem? Because we need a tower and there's 3 people that can build it. And from what I understand, only one of them has a program.
There's only one contractor in the local area. It's called Chicago Bridge and Iron, and they can do the job.
So what do we do? I mean, I don't want to get in a situation Steve alluded to where they'll stop taking our bids and our quotes.
Chicago Bridge and Iron will bid the project. As
And-
long as we change the,
I- I
it looks like we have to change the format to make sure that,
Law. I get it. There's a law with the program, whatever it is, and I think there's value in the program. But we need water. We have needs that need to get met. This is a very, very specific issue. I mean, we've been down this road before. We ended up tabling it. We can't keep tabling it.
Well, can we negotiate with them?
Yes, that would be an option.
so Chicago Bridge and Iron is the company that's going to do the job.
Yeah,
I
we,
have to tell you that.
we could actually waive bids and negotiate with the CB and I.
Forest Point to get it done.
That would be an option. It would take 2/3 of the board to approve.
As long as they, so Chicago Bridge and Iron has 2 shops. Okay. They have one shop that meets the requirements and one shop that doesn't. So I like the idea, what Steve said is we just put in more specific language for the Department of Labor standards, so our installers are qualified and trained. So I think that's the route to go. I think he's on the right track. Then they'll bid it and we're done. We'll get our tank.
I agree. I think we should at least put it out there to meet our requirement. At that point, if we don't get a bid back for some reason, which I'm not concerned with that, honestly, at this point, as long as they know up front that that's what our requirements are. I think we do it the way that our policy states. And then if for some reason we don't get a bid back, then we have to go to option B at that point, which could be negotiate, which could mean remove some of that requirement if that's what is required. But I believe, I mean, the policy's there for a reason, and I think we should at least go that route to start.
The policy has always been there, right? You said,
Since
Mark, that's from
2009.
2006, did you say?
Nine.
9. So when the bids have been put out before, was that not also the policy then? And was that not also considered when they gave the bid back? That's where I'm losing the argument here, that the discussion. So it wasn't put forth that they had to comply with that at the time, even though that was the village's ordinance?
No, it was put in the bid, but as Trustee Gately alluded to, one company can bid both non-apprenticeship or apprenticeship. They have the
Mhm.
option to do both. For whatever reason, they chose not to.
So they
submit a
did
bid
not do both.
those at
Okay.
that time.
Why
But
do you-
the discussion was, sorry.
No, it's okay. Good.
I think the discussion was that part of that may have been because the requirement wasn't tight enough in the bid specs to try to keep anybody else from trying to imitate that they can meet that requirement.
The system.
You're right. Yeah, I'm inclined to go with the existing ordinance and comply with that. And if there's only one company, I guess that's what we have to go ahead and deal with. If he bids the apprenticeship program, we're going to guarantee that we're going to be getting skilled mechanics that do the job right the first time, as opposed to a skeleton crew. I understand that he has to add people if he goes with the apprenticeship program. But on the other hand, if he doesn't, then I envision a contractor building our tower with just a skeleton crew, and that kind of bothers me too. So I'd want to go for the quality, and I think in the long run, we'd be saving our residents a good deal of heartache and money. So that I'm in a position to agree with trustees Nitschwich and Gately that we, and then if it doesn't work, try to negotiate something with them. I mean, they're only one company. I don't know who they're going to be bidding against anyway. So that's the issue.
Well, I think the issue may be that they've already done this 3 times and it's a lot of work for them to do it. I think that, I don't know. I mean, we are now in a position where we need to do it and we need to move forward, like you were
That's why I
saying.
thought if we negotiate with them, we're serious about it and
Would
versus
it,
bidding on it.
yeah,
and
would
we're
it,
like,
would it
well,
save time to negotiate?
You kind of have the numbers already, right? Roughly, I mean,
Would,
to some degree.
would it be easier on them to negotiate rather than bid? I guess I don't know.
Well, Well, I think what the company's asking for to bid it is just to tighten up the apprenticeship language per
Right.
craft. Because I think our, from what Steve just said, is that that's why they didn't want to bid it last time.
Right, but if there's only one, I mean, typically, I think we would negotiate that.
My only concern is if you go to bid again, they're like, this is it.
What's the downside of negotiating with them, in your opinion?
They're the only ones that'll bid it. There won't be any other.
They do.
They'll bid.
They know
They'll
you're
bid it.
serious.
I think what we need to be all aware of is what Steve said earlier about other other municipalities sending out bids, which will only increase the price even further. So I think the sooner we do this, the better off we're going to be.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay.
I'm with the plan he has in place, I think is the best plan moving forward.
I mean, but if you just went and negotiated them, they know we're serious, so, right?
Correct.
Bidding
So,
is bidding.
but to Kevin's point, it would need a supermajority vote of the
way
board.
that- Yeah. I got it.
So
Right.
if you didn't have enough trustees that were interested in doing
Right.
that,
No,
you'd
I
be
get it. Right.
spinning
I'm
your
just-
wheels.
I'm
So you
just
just
hoping
have to
they
make
bid.
sure.
So,
As long as it's Chicago Bridge and Iron and they follow the apprenticeship language, yes, the answer to that would be yes, we can negotiate
To
that.
negotiate.
Well,
Yeah.
that was what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Which is, right, that's going to be part of it, part of the negotiation, so I don't see, why not do it that way?
Yeah.
Michelle, do you see a downside going straight to negotiate?
you come up, come on up.
I mean, I hate to discuss negotiations at a public meeting, but I would tell you that just if you were going to do it, it might make sense to do it before you bid the project, because if no one ended up bidding, then they would know that no one ended up bidding. But if you go straight to them, you
That-
have this, hey,
That's kind of what we're,
That's
Thinking.
exactly what
That's what
I
we were
was gonna
saying.
say.
okay.
that's kind of what we're thinking.
Well, I think that's what we were
Read my
we were
mind.
talking about, right?
They asked the question, would it make a difference in if you were to put it out for bid and negotiate with them? Like the time frame wise, do you think the time frame would be shorter for negotiation than to bid? I think somebody,
Right, no, that's a great.
That's my impression. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Is that right, Steve?
I have, I can't answer that fully, but it does add the advantage that you're serious and they'll jump on it versus they have a chance at one in another area.
Right.
But regardless, I'd like to prep you. It's not like you go to them and here's the number. When we go out to bid, it requires a minimum of 30 days of them having the plans in their hands. They have to deal with their subcontractors. There's a lot of coordination that has to go along with that. So I don't want to give the impression all of a sudden, a week later, we're coming back at the next meeting. It is still a process.
That's my concern since we already done this, 3 times? 0 bids, 1 bid, 0 bids.
And we think the water amount that you're asking for is going to be adequate with all of the new requests?
Yes. So as of right now, we're about, what we would like to have is the AWWA standard. That's American Water Works Association. They want you to have 100% of storage available at all times in the air of what you have your average daily pumpage. So what we produce basically in water. On average, it fluctuates from the low 1s to the low 3s, millions of gallons a day. Our average is about 2.1 million gallons smoothed over the year. We have only 1.5 in the air right now. So we're 600,000 gallons short of where we'd want to be. But then if you look at Aurora Pack, for instance, and their expansion, that can add another 200 to 300,000 gallons a day to that. So that's why we thought, and then we've had another one that was almost opened at one point wanting to come here. So plus we have new subdivisions building right now. So we're looking at 1.25. If the price was right, that would make sense to consider it.
That's a big tank.
That's a big tank.
Yeah, my question was, should it be 1.5?
You know, honestly, that's a good question, but Michelle's actually doing the water study right now. They're doing a comprehensive water study of all of the future water. The only issue I would preface that is we do need more, we will need a fourth tank eventually one day if we grow at this pace. But I think the only thing that we would want to preface that we haven't actually gone through yet is we're talking about an east side water pressure issue, which means it may dictate that a tower be built on the east side, and that size of that tank could fluctuate depending on how much pressure you produce. So right now, it's hard to say, yes, we probably will need a fourth tank one day, but the size of it is unknown at this time, but you can please help me.
Correct. It will depend on demands, and we do foresee another tower needing to be built. And the critical nature of the deficit, we're trying to get you there with the deficit, plus add some room for the growth that we know is already here.
It does, I want to, so that we're not scaring everybody here. Once you put a certain number of water in the air for our size town, even if we grow, at least having that much water, we'd be up to roughly 2.75 million gallons. What it does is it buys you time. So like if there was a fire and let's say Aurora Pack was having a heavy producing day and a fire comes out, the fire drains the towers very fast. Hydrants opening up, drain towers very fast. Our wells kick on. The fear is that a well will not keep up with the pace of the water leaving the hydrants. That scenario played out, I want to say, at Pheasant Run, which is why when they had that fire, they had to open up water from West Chicago, I believe. I think St. Charles and West Chicago had to have an interconnect open. And for that reason, you would want to always have enough storage where it goes down slower because it's going over 3 towers over time. So you have more time to kick the wells on and try to balance it. It just buys you a little more time.
Well, I'm in favor of your plan, Steve, about utilizing the chart requiring all companies to list their US DOL apprenticeship program name and registration number. If that gets it for CBI, that'll work.
And I'd be good with going straight to negotiate if they're the only company that's going to do it.
Same.
The same. I think we should go with the CBI and start with trying to negotiate and get it done as quickly as we can.
So here's what we would do if that's what I'm hearing from the board. Tomorrow, Michelle and Brandon, Brian and I will sit down and we'll talk about exactly how we'll approach CBI, but we can do that. I mean, Michelle has contacts at all the companies, so we can contact them.
Could I ask a clarifying question? I'm going in to negotiate. Am I negotiating a 1.25 million gallon tank or a 1 million gallon tank? Or are we asking for both?
We're asking for a 1.25 at $1 million pricing.
That's the answer.
Oh, go better, boys. Steve. That's how you.
Good answer, Steve. Good answer.
And we'll put the cash up front.
I would say 1.25, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's
I
what
would
makes
say.
sense.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item last. Steve and Nathan.
Item last is one that you've already seen. So this is about zoning. And if you remember, Nathan was going over all the zoning uses in our zoning classifications. And the last discussion kind of varied. It was based on home occupations. And really the only change Nathan's going to go through here in the back. Yep. Is he's going to talk about home occupations again and specifically that slide.
Yeah, so the last meeting, we went through all the different zoning districts and what's going from special to permitted and all that stuff. So that didn't really change since the last time. But the board had the question on home occupations. The home occupation standards are pretty good. We did a few minor tweaks to make sure that renters actually have permission from their landlord. And we wrote explicitly in there that you have to follow the commercial vehicle rules. But the general standards in the home occupation section were good in terms of, no signage, hours, number of people. But really, there's a certain group of problem uses that cause problems in a home setting. Car repair is one of them we get calls on. So what we did is we added a list of prohibited uses. So, we have all the standards, but this list right here, you just can't do as a home occupation. And I think it covers, you know, the ones that would have a lot of traffic, a lot of people there, that you would, you know, be doing in your home. So that's the list. You know, kennels, banquet halls, catering, clubs or lodges, contractor yards, dry cleaning, recreation facilities, food stores, funeral homes, gas station, machine shops, motor vehicle repairs and sales, restaurants, short-term rentals, listed it specifically, and tattoo shops. If there's any others that you can think of that just should not be in a home setting, you know, we can certainly add it to it, but this just makes it a little bit easier to enforce. So, you know, like we have one right now that's doing a car repair, and we don't think they meet those standards, but you have to catch them not meeting the standards. This, you can just say, look, car repair is not allowed as a home occupation. You just can't be doing it.
How about the gun shop sales?
So we actually have a couple of firearm sales as home occupations already. So one guy who does cleaning and one guy who just processes paperwork. So I didn't put that on the list.
So I'm more interested in somebody actually, yeah, not the cleaning or not paperwork, but if they actually have. Yeah. I'm just curious, like, I don't know if the neighbors would like it if, you know, might be a concern if somebody's looking to break in and they have a bunch of guns, or I don't know, just thought, but.
So I'm actually might have Joe chime in here for a sec, because I'm not totally sure on all the process, but the one guy we have has his FFL license. So basically he's licensed to do the paperwork for the feds. So if you could
Yeah,
explain
that
how
wouldn't be a
works.
concern. That,
Yeah, that's like a middleman.
Yeah.
For the processing, not actually a gun store.
yeah.
So if you ordered something online, you would go to him to do the background check paperwork.
And the other guy's a gunsmith, kind of, I mean. like-
Yeah, the other one we had does like antiques and things, and he'll repair and put everything together. So I didn't add that to the list because we have some that would fit that category, but
I will point out too, going back, short-term rentals, when we had the conversation about Airbnbs and VRBOs in neighborhoods, it was the fact that the state had basically, through the court system, determined that short-term rentals were anything under 30 days. That's not convoluted, but that is the way that we've been enforcing that. Having it specifically defined and then spelled out, this cannot happen, is way easier to enforce. So I'm glad we have that.
Okay. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's good you have contractor yard in there. It's in.
You don't have like selling livestock and things, but I'm assuming we don't really have any requests for that or yet.
That's good.
not yet.
Okay.
We can always add to this list if anything comes up, so.
All right, so we're all good?
Yeah.
All right. Finish the discussion, I'll make a motion to go to exec session, discuss
Motion to go to exec session.
Second.
property acquisition. All in favor,
Property
say
acquisition.
aye. Opposed? All right. Exec session.